So we have a viewer, I think from Wilmer, who is concerned about proposed new mandates to control the relationship between employers and employees, and this viewer wants to know how the panel feels about statewide preemption of local government labor mandates. Now, translating that into English, what I think we have here is a question about
uniform labor laws,
minimum wage laws, other kinds of requirements for employer-employee relationships, right, and whether those should be preempted by the state. So let's start with you, Senator Marty. What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of times people who talk about we want local control and the best government is the local government are the ones who are pushing, say, hey, we want local government to make decisions. Unless they disagree with me, then I don't want them to do that. I think the governor was right to say he was going to veto preemption legislation, and I think that's appropriate. In Minneapolis and so on, where people were fighting for higher minimum wages, again, they're saying, look, the federal government doesn't address the issue, the state doesn't address the issue, we can't make ends meet, and it's a crisis for us. We want to have some help with doing it. So they approach their local governments, and that's what democracy is about, and coming into the state level. And the state has had so many preemption bills on everything that local governments seem to be trying to do, is trying to change their electoral systems, say local governments can't make decisions on a lot of things that they have in the past. I like the idea. There are some things, yeah, we need to do a lot of things at the state level, and some things have to be done at the federal level, but I like the idea that local governments can experiment, and they can often lead the way and give ideas for state government on the direction we might want to move. But I don't like the idea of preempting local governments when there's no reason to other than we don't like their decisions.
President Baker?
You know, I would respectfully disagree with John. I think it's something that as a labor guy myself, and I have a small business, the difference between this and, let's say, the time when we had the smoking laws, when certain communities could do no smoking in restaurants and public places. What's different about this is that they had a choice in that area, but it didn't affect me over across the border when I had to choose or choose not to have smoking in my restaurant. The difference here is you've got large companies that are all over the state of Minnesota doing business, and yet they have to now understand what the laws and the rules are in Minneapolis and St. Paul, when folks like big manufacturers in my area have to now have a separate set of books and records to make sure that my employees that are spending time in cities like that have different laws are now have to be tracked differently. The problem is that not that businesses in Minneapolis, St. Paul can't pay their employees more. They sure can. I think that is really, to me, what supply and demand is about. I am paying my employees more than I've ever paid them before, to a level that I'm actually quite nervous about, because how much can I charge for my hamburger and my bottle of beer? It makes me nervous. But you know what? I'm going to make sure I have the right employees there, and by gosh, they are worth every penny that they're getting. I'm just nervous that if we have a lot of these different rules around the state, we're going to have a very convoluted mess on our hands, and when you're trying to attract new business into Minnesota, I'm nervous about having a lot of different patchwork ideas. And again, that might be right for local business and local ownership there, then let them do it themselves, but I do think we need to have some uniform labor laws around Minnesota. That's my opinion.
Senator Weber?
I would have to agree with Representative Baker. I think at the end of the day, you have to recognize that in many industries, and particularly I think of the restaurant business, that type of thing, we're going to see a lot of people just basically losing jobs, going to more robotics in terms of the computer entry and this type of thing, yeah. Fewer servers, and recognizing that many of these people also deal with with substantial tip income, and quite frankly, if you start cutting hours, you start cutting income, not just from an hour standpoint, but from their ability to earn additional money because, quite frankly, of the good service that they are capable of providing. As an employer, if you're outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and you're trying to keep track of all these people going into different areas and which one, I mean, we really are creating a nightmare for the local businesses, and so I think that you know, I'm 16 years of local government, and I understand what John is talking about when we're talking about those issues of local control and what have you. But you also have to understand that when that local control starts to create that mass of a confusion and consternation in the communities around you, then there's a point where state has to say something.
Representative Johnson?
Well, I agree with John. I think I find it interesting, and I do a lot of forums with my Republican colleagues in my area, and I hear about local control, but it seems to be local control when I want it, but not local control when I don't want it. And I think there is a lot to be said for innovative local control and local innovation. The Clean Clean Air Act really started in my area, and it was kind of a case where innovation in a local area, and it became a statewide phenomenon. And then, you look back on it, can you imagine if we had smoking in restaurants now? It's hard to remember. But at the time, it was really tough to do, and the only way we could get there was through some local innovation. I'm thinking of sick leave for everybody. My goodness, I can't imagine. I always say, do you really want a hamburger served by somebody who's sick? I don't think you do. And if it means I have to pay an extra nickel or a dime or a quarter for that hamburger, it seems well worth it. And I think it's very appropriate that some cities are experimenting with that. And I hope that sets a movement whereby it would move the state towards everybody would have access to earned sick leave. And it just makes good sense. And there's some labor laws, minimum labor standards that I think we haven't really addressed in this state. Sick leave is a darn good example of it, where I think local communities can help us get there, and I think it would make it better for everybody. I'm confident. I have a lot of confidence in Minnesota businesses and entrepreneurs, and I think they deal with complexity all the time in many different facets of their business. I'm always impressed with what you folks are doing. I'm very genuine about that. I think they can handle the differences in the labor standards.
And to your point too, Clark, I think you're right. What's happening here in the last couple of years is we're having this conversation because I'm actually putting in now some sick issues or some sick language with my handbooks. Because I have to deal with it, because I know it's probably going to come, because I don't want my employees to come in sick, and I also know how hard they work. A lot of my kitchen employees really work from paycheck to paycheck.
You bet they do.
And when they miss a day or two of work, that's a big deal to them. We're dealing with this, but I think the better employees are doing that. The better employers are actually addressing this issue. It's coming, but boy, when you start pushing it on them, when you start making it where the folks are not ready for this, it's like farmers and the buffers. They will come if you bring them with a carrot, not the stick. That's kind of my point when it comes to mandating and things like that. There are places for local control, absolutely, but there are some we have to be very careful of.
The one thing I want to say, though, in response, though, too, is I agree with what Clark is saying, too. There are a lot of workers who, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and anything goes wrong. Their housing, we're ending up having the shortages of housing are because people can't afford housing.
Right.
The shortages of other things are because people can't afford food and housing and basic necessities, which is why I think either we need to have a fairer tax code or we need to make sure people get paid more so they can do that. And that is a shift in the economy, but the disparity between high income and low income has been driven by our tax code. I mean, we've been making the tax code more and more, the top end pays less and the bottom end pays a lot more. And I think we have to look at changing it to the way it used to be. I mean, under the Eisenhower administration, it was very steeply progressive tax codes, and we had a much fairer economy, because my goal is to make sure everybody who's working gets a decent living and they're not struggling, they're not living in poverty despite working 2 jobs sometimes. So I think that's part of the equation we have to do, too, in saying that some employers do good and others don't. Well, I think we've got to be concerned about all the workers, not just some.
The reality is, I think if I'm recalling the news correctly, and I look to you, Representative Johnson, but the governor has made very clear that if a preemption bill passes, he's going to stamp it with a veto and send it back. Is that kind of where we're at on this issue?
Well, I would assume so. He was quite clear about that last year, and I assume he is this year. Another interesting point, I just saw a tidbit the other day in the news, and restaurant employment is up in the Twin Cities.